Right now for the latest out of Canberra, joined by Sky News Political Editor Andrew Clennell. Let's start on the hot issue of energy. We seem to talk about it every week, Andrew. That promise to reduce power bills by $275. Problem is, of course, they're going up, not down. You've broken the story today that the federal government's considering a gas reservation policy, forcing producers to sell into the domestic market at a capped price. Now, highly controversial. We heard from the Queensland Premier there. What about coal prices? Will they intervene there? And why the difference in the treatment of coal and gas?
Well, it is an interesting one, isn't it? That's my information. They're not going to intervene when it comes to coal price. As you just said, Peter, I've reported this afternoon that I understand the plan is to force gas exporters, who I guess are already governed by some federal rules, to supply to the domestic market where their gas sales aren't yet contracted and at a certain price, which will reduce gas prices. The problem is a really big consideration is electricity bills, and half of the cost of them are because of the large coal price at the moment. And the suggestion to me is they'll leave that to the states to sort out. Chris Bowen will be saying to the energy ministers, that's for you to sort out how to manage that aspect. If that's the case, they'll be failing, I guess, because they'll be able to bring down gas prices, which of course is important, but it's equally important to bring down the coal price. And the energy ministers last month were briefed by the Australian energy regulator that was the case. So that's a much more difficult problem. I guess the electricity retailers kind of rest with, and the power generation rests more with state governments. There are already, as I say, rules around, federal rules around gas supply and the like, a code of conduct. So they find the federal government, I think, will say it's easier for us to manage the gas problem than the coal problem. Politically, they'll be settled with both problems.
The problem is that, well, I agree with you, yeah. The point is they made the promise in the election 275, and you can cry if you like now that this is a state issue and this one over here is federal. They should have thought about that back in May, because I can tell you it'll be one of those issues that will be top of mind along with mortgage prices when people go to vote next time.
No doubt about it.
Helen Haynes, she's the independent for the seat of Indi in country Victoria. She asked a legitimate question today about the oversight of the choice of commissioner for this new anti-crime commission. Have a listen.
Around oversight and the simple majority question, I'm just seeking an explanation.
Given you were supported for the high office of being the deputy chair of that committee in recognition of your genuine support for that,
my left.
It did not come through as a recommendation.
Order.
I thought she was going to cry, Andrew, seriously. Where's this bill up to tonight? It's going to pass?
Will pass tonight. But what will happen is the coalition are going to move an amendment requesting 3/4 of the parliament needs to vote in or approve of a new commissioner. The government will reject that, the Greens will reject that in the Senate, and the coalition won't then say, well, we're going to block the bill, so it'll go through. The Greens and David Pocock will move some pretty controversial amendments in terms of widening the definition of corruption. Again, they'll fail on the floor of the Senate, but they'll see it through as well. I think the government made it pretty clear last couple of days, Peter, that they weren't going to move on any of those amendments, and they were happy to flay either the Liberals or the Greens if this thing didn't get up, given that it was a big part of the election campaign. So we're going to get a National Anti-Corruption Commission. We're going to get it in July, but there'll be some tension and a tinge of resentment, I think, from the crossbench that some of these recommendations around the appointment of a commissioner haven't been taken up. And let's see if that becomes an issue in the years ahead, depending on how the first commissioner behaves.
Spot on. I think if the commissioner's not seen to be straight and removed from politics, this thing will have a very dogged history. Let's go to this censure motion for Scott Morrison. We're told it's set for tomorrow morning. The opposition won't support it in terms of a party vote, but we're told Bridget Archer, who doesn't mind crossing the floor, she may well do that. Any other coalition types likely to sit with Labor?
I don't believe so. I don't know. I know Karen Andrews is pretty much ruling it out, and she was the most annoyed, or one of the most annoyed at least, in terms of those in Parliament around the secret ministerial arrangements. Bridget Archer will cross. Hard to say if any others will. Certainly haven't heard it. But what I will tell you, Peter, is it's my understanding that it's highly likely when this occurs tomorrow morning that Scott Morrison will speak to it. So that will be a moment worth viewing, won't it, when Scott Morrison gets up in the Parliament, if it is to occur, and my information is likely to occur, and gives an account and attacks the motion.
And defends the indefensible, I suppose. What about Alex Hawke? He's a very close mate of the former Prime Minister. In the 9 newspapers today, he's reported to have said Morrison would have lost his job as PM, or at least faced a challenge after that holiday to Hawaii, but for the pandemic. He was asked on camera about it today. He claimed they were great mates still, but he didn't deny it. Now, I reckon this is part of a rebranding from Alex Hawke. We know he was involved doing the Prime Minister's bidding and all those pretty poor pre-selection choices, or the majority poor pre-selection choices for the New South Wales division start of this year, wasn't it? Is he trying to avoid a challenge to his own pre-selection next time, perhaps?
Well, that could well be the case. I certainly think there are people in that part of Sydney interested in his seat. There are state people, if they lose the election, who might be interested in his seat. And, you know, let's be honest about it, Peter. Peter Dutton is not the biggest fan in the world of Alex Hawke. So he needs all the favours he can get. Maybe not associating with Scott Morrison will help him, maybe not. But he has form in this regard, Alex Hawke. He was the loyal lieutenant of David Clark. Then he left him and set up his own faction. Clark always felt betrayed in the New South Wales Parliament. You know, there's no greater example than Alex Hawke when it comes to the old saying, if you want a mate in politics, get a dog.
You're very kind there. We could have gone further on that, but we'll leave it there. Let's go to the news late this afternoon. Former Wagga MP Darryl Maguire charged by the Australian Border Force over his alleged involvement in a cash for visa scam while sitting in the Parliament. Of course, we know he resigned following the ICAC inquiry, later revealed, of course, to be in a relationship then with former Premier, now former Premier Gladys Berejiklian. What can you tell us?
Well, it's extraordinary, isn't it? And I guess we were expecting perhaps some of the dealings that occurred in ICAC to lead to charges for Darryl Maguire. This did come up in ICAC, but it wasn't really in their jurisdiction, so they sent it off to Home Affairs and Border Force and the like. As you just described, Peter, he's been charged in relation to accepting cash while an MP, presumably advertising the fact he's an MP, to assist visa applications. And that's illegal. So he's been charged in relation to that. We still await that report on Gladys Berejiklian and on Darryl Maguire on other matters. But I have to say that I believe there'll be certainly adverse findings against Maguire, and I believe adverse findings too against Gladys Berejiklian. No suggestion she had any knowledge of this visa thing, I should point out. But I think there was plenty of evidence before ICAC that she had knowledge of some of his business dealings that he shouldn't have been getting up to. And she had responsibilities as Premier under the ICAC Act to report any knowledge of those matters, particularly after he resigned after being named at an ICAC hearing in 2018 before the 2019 election, and she never did that. So I do think ICAC should get on with this. Report. I do wonder whether there should be a time limit around these sorts of reports because it's dragged on too long. But when it comes down, I do not expect it to be good news for Gladys Berejiklian.
Well, we'll see, won't we? I mean, this is the difference in Victoria. They're all secret, these reports. You can't even talk about them in an election campaign. And in New South Wales, just the mere mention of an ICAC hearing and you quit before the reports even land. Andrew Clennell, thank you for your time.